Hey everyone, and welcome back to my channel, my videos. Hi, hello. If you've been around for a while, especially kind of like since the beginning of my channel when I first started making videos, you will probably be no stranger to Debi Pearl. Now, Debi and her husband Michael run No Greater Joy Ministries, which have literally been around for decades, creating and self-publishing religious material. One of their biggest books and most problematic books is called To Train Up a Child, and it was for a while like my most viewed video for good reason, or rather series of videos. I think I split it into two, and it is so messed up. Basically, this book teaches you how to train a child, which basically means like lulling them into hurting themselves so you can beat them for it, to try and teach them a lesson. It's like if your breastfeeding baby is biting, pull its hair. If they're under 6 months old, hit them with this type of branch. If they're over 6 months old, hit them with this type of branch. When they get older, use a ceramic pipe. It is messed up. It is really, really messed up stuff. Basically, the whole goal of it is how to get your children to submit to you. And the sad part is that so many families and parents have used this book and taken the advice that it's been indirectly linked to the deaths of at least 7 children, if not more, which is absolutely heartbreaking. And like I say, this couple, they haven't just been writing parenting books, but they've been writing like marriage advice books and all kinds of stuff like this. Debi also wrote Created to Be His Helpmeet, which is a book about how women are born to submit to and serve men. I briefly reviewed part of it on my channel. Maybe now that I'm like older and in a different place in my life, it would be good to go back to that and kind of reread some of it and do a more in-depth review. That could be an interesting one. As well as all these books, Michael and Debi also have many children and many grandchildren. They're one of these really huge families that just keeps multiplying. And their families are kind of like continuing the work that they've been doing. And they've also been linked to families like the Duggars in the past, who we have recently spoken about for, again, heartbreaking reasons. Anyway, it turns out a few years back that Debi decided to take a little dip into the world of fiction. And this is her first and only fiction book. It was supposed to be the first one in a series, but the rest just never got written. There is a blurb in the back for the second book, like a little preview, a little summary and a teaser, but it just didn't get written. Apparently the second book was meant to be called The Test, and it just didn't happen, which is a shame. So I think I'm going to get to the end of this book and just be incredibly disappointed. No, I'm joking, but this is The Vision. It is the first in the series, The Last Publishers, and it is absolutely a self-insert book where Debi has tried to write about herself and her own life and all these characters, and it's a thing. Basically, The Last Publishers are a Christian publishing company who start to make miracle jam, but they're also being targeted by Muslim terrorists. I'm not even joking. It is very clear that the main married couple in this book are supposed to be self-inserts of Michael and Debi themselves. Yeah, and I reckon that she's absolutely based the other characters off people she knows too. It is definitely a vanity project, which, you know, on the one hand, I want to be like, let people publish what they want. Let people write what they want. If she enjoyed this, if she had a bit of fun with it, if she wanted to make herself a character in a book, absolutely fine. What harm is it doing, really? Like Lele Pons' book, that is absolutely a self-insert as well. And it's cringy, it's poorly written, there are some problematic things, but on the whole, it's not a very harmful book. And while I kind of have a little bit of a giggle at it, I don't really have a big problem with it. This one, on the other hand, is offensive to almost every person you can think of. This isn't just a, oh, look, it's a little old lady writing a silly little Christian book. This is offensive. This is bad. This is harmful. This is everything wrong with fundamentalist beliefs. And that's why I have a problem with it. Anyway, today we're going to be looking at the first part of the book, the first 100 pages or so, which is about the first third-ish of the book. Before we actually jump in talking about the book, I have some shameless little bits of self-promotion that I want to get out here and just talk to you about. The first is that if you like my t-shirt, which you can't really see in this video, give me a second, look at this. If you like my t-shirt and you want to be fearless and bold and courageous and brave and all these other things, you can get this in my merch store right now. It is the comfiest t-shirt, but it's also my favourite little bit of merch at the minute. All these little slogans on here are hand-drawn, or rather hand-written by me and like applied together in the design. And you can also get this t-shirt as leggings and some other things, and it's fun and I like it, and kind of does makes me feel a little bit empowered, makes me feel pretty good about myself. It's nice, and it's a nice little reminder to, stay strong, be cool. I have other merch available as well if you want to check that out. But the big exciting thing that I want to tell you about is that my new website is finally up and running and everything is coming together, and I'm so happy with it. I think the tech issues that I had, I'm going to take it as a blessing in disguise because I love the new website so much, and it's all just working, and it's lovely and it's great. And if you head over there now, you can see a little kind of like gallery archive of all my photography and my arts and crafts and all this stuff that I'm working on and learning and all that fun stuff. But the bits that might be interesting to you are, I have got the Fresh Poet Society forums back up and running, and they're going to be starting again on there soon. So you can go over there, talk to each other, get poetry writing advice, get creative writing advice from each other. I'll be dipping in there too and letting you know my thoughts. And each month I give you a different prompt for you to like write poetry about and get feedback from other people. And some months it's going to be kind of like quite a literal prompt. Other months I might pick a form or a structure that I want you to try and write a poem in. And I'll be on there too, like dipping in, giving people advice, giving you my feedback as much as I can. Maybe I'll share some of my own work on there as well. And it's just a nice place for everyone to get together and encourage each other and talk about poetry and all that good stuff. And finally, one last thing is on the website, I also now have my photography print store as well. So you can get some really nice high quality prints of some of my favourite photos from throughout the years. I know I've said this before, but like photography has always been like my first love and my absolute passion, and I've been doing it for years, and I'm the kind of person who takes a camera everywhere I go. So I go on adventures and I go like, I like to be outside, and I like gigs, and I like everything, and I like to capture it all in photographs and as memories and kind of create art out of even just like the everyday stuff. So that's kind of what you'll find over there. And if you'd like a little piece of my art in your home, you can go and get a print now. If you're still worried about COVID stuff, I am using a printing and fulfillment company at the minute, so they have all the COVID safety guidelines in place, so you don't need to worry about any of that stuff. It's still all safe and good. And I've tried to keep prices as kind of low and affordable as possible. I do worldwide shipping. It's all good stuff. There's something for everyone on there if you're interested in that, and it's just kind of lovely to get a little bit of support. And like, if anyone's bought my prints in the past as well from the old shop that I used to have on my old website, then please send me your pictures and let me know what you think of them and all that kind of stuff. And I love hearing from you guys. Okay, that is far too much self-promotion. Let's jump into this book, because that's what we're all here for, right? Thank you for letting me do that though. Okie pokey. So why did I say that? What am I like? Okay, so before we go into the actual plot and go through this book in depth, I have a few general thoughts. This book is offensive. That is my main thought. It is full of offensive stereotypes about race and class and appearance and age and gender and religion. It's incredibly Islamophobic. And I say that as someone who is completely open to criticizing Islam, and I do in my videos. I criticize it as much as I would any harmful religion. I think most religions have some harmful aspects to them, and it's okay to call them out and say, well, this is hurting people for this reason and this is for this reason. I get that, but I also don't think it's okay to say, well, all Muslims bad, all Christians bad, all Wiccans bad, whatever. Like, that's not okay, because it's just not true. However, in this book, the main villains are Muslim, and their only crime is being Muslim. And they're just hated for that reason. And they're built up to be these like stereotyped terrorists who just hate them Christian whores and all that rubbish stuff. And it's repulsive how it's written. The main heroes are trying to convert everyone to Christianity in this book. I'm not even joking. That is their purpose. They talk about it all the time. They literally want the entire world converted to Christianity. And that's what they're doing. Really? You're going to mow the lawn outside now? Guys! Well, that's just inconvenient. They could be there a while, I'm just going to have to talk through it. But, like, I don't know if I'm explaining this right. Basically, it seems that the Christians and the Muslims want similar things? No, they don't. They don't even want similar things. Christians want to convert everyone. The Muslims just want to be left alone. But the Christians are like, we're doing this so much better because we have these good motivations and we're only trying to convert everyone and we're only being kind of forceful with it. But the Muslims are bad because in order to protect themselves, they're being terrorists. And they make them into these cartoon villains where they're going around bombing everyone and trying to kill everyone, and they have assassins, and it's very weird. It's so weird. It's clearly written by someone who's never met a Muslim person in their life. So the way I've been making this video is I've been going through and reading the book, and as I've been doing it, I've been like annotating the pages. You really can't see this, it's all blown out, but I've been like annotating the pages as I've gone. And then I went back and kind of compiled all the thoughts into notes and then built a script around it and whatever. And as I've been reviewing my notes through here, the most common things that I've said are, wow, what the hell, and rude. Because there is just, look at this. Sorry, what? What? How? Who? Rude? It's absolutely ridiculous because, like, just so much of what's said in this book and what's said by the characters is so offensive or bizarre or rude or just unnecessary. It's something. And now, I am going to warn you now, some of the things we're going to be reading from this book are, as I've said, incredibly offensive. And some of them I'm just going to be reading out and just letting them sit there and letting you make up your own mind about what that means, because I don't want to comment on this stuff. But please, please know, if I'm reading this out, even if I don't explicitly say this is wrong, because I know it's wrong and I think it's wrong, and I do not support the views in this book whatsoever. Oh my god, they're really bad. Please know, just because I'm reading them, they're not views that I share. We're here to criticise this author and her book today, and even when I'm not 100% explicit in that, that's what we're doing. And as for the writing in the book, I know I said it was awfully written, and it's not well written, but it's not the worst fiction book I've ever read in terms of quality of writing. Like, it's a good 4 out of 10. There's a lot of issues with plot structure, there's a lot of issues with the characters, there's a lot of issues with repetition, a lot of dull parts, a lot of telling instead of showing. She never really introduces the characters properly, she doesn't really build the characters. She'll sometimes bring in a character, just have them do something creepy and then they die. We'll get to that. And Debbie does this really frustrating thing where she'll just name a character, and then instead of showing us anything about them and letting us like figure things out for ourselves, she just has the character tell us their entire backstory by praying to God and telling God everything we need to know about their lives. It's very weird. So one example is probably about 80 pages in, and just out of nowhere, we get this character Omar, and we've never met him before, we've never seen him before, and I have no problem with introducing new characters. It just came out of nowhere for me, and I was a bit like, oh, okay. And so this guy Omar's just driving down the road, and he sees this teenager hitchhiking, and he starts talking to himself, saying, I'm supposed to be teaching Hebrews in 10 minutes. Somebody help that poor girl. Lord, someone helped my own sweet Tess when she was a young girl in trouble. Lord God, please don't make me pick up that girl. You know I already spent 10 years behind bars. You know I got a sweet wife and 4 children. He just told us everything we need to know about him in like 2 pages with him praying to God. And it's just very bizarre to read. I mean, maybe if you do that once, it's okay. But this is how every single character introduces themselves in the book, and it's really weird. It's like, can you imagine real people doing this in the real world, and every day they spend like half an hour praying to God, giving him a recap of their life so far? So weird. The other thing to note that is very surprising is that this book passes the Bechdel test, which I've spoken about briefly before on my channel, and I think it's a very interesting concept. Basically, a book passes the Bechdel test if you have 2 female characters who interact with each other and have a conversation about something other than men. And it's meant to be a kind of feminist test to be like, well, you know, is this book man-centered? Is it only focused on men and relationships and love and blah, blah, blah? And it's a feminist test. This book passes, but it is by no means feminist. So that just made me laugh. Obviously, like, the Bechdel test is, and the kind of its meaning and everything, is far more complicated than that. I thought it was a funny thing to throw in. Anyway, the other odd thing about the writing style of this book are the footnotes. Oh my god, the footnotes. Debbie likes to add them in so randomly because she claims the book is like based completely in reality, and that everything she's writing about, including this miracle cure-all jam, could totally be real, and she uses her footnotes to prove it. So in the very, very beginning of the book, we get a note on the footer text, and she says, the grey boxes at the bottom of some of the pages found in this book contain spot research. I wanted my readers to know that much of what they are reading is based on facts. Yellowstone truly is a threatening monster. Muslim honor killings do happen regularly, including here in the USA. The white supremacist type groups are growing in numbers. Some herbs and berries have amazing healing powers. The end is near. And the way she uses them is just so odd. It's so odd. So, some are just weird but kind of harmless. Like, at random points, she'll just provide a recipe for, like, eggs Benedict or cookies. I think I don't have a problem with that, I guess. It's a thing. Whereas others are Debi's chance to spew facts that support her weird views about, like, the Muslim threat to the world. And it's odd. Like, we'll cover some in a little more detail towards the end of this video and you'll see what I mean, but it's just a very bizarre thing to include. She also likes to put these, like, little subheadings at the start of the big paragraphs, like this one. Pretty good, 7 a.m. Life force, 7:40 a.m. Which way, 7:50 a.m. They're weird little subheadings. I'm not quite sure why she included them. The times I kind of understand, but the general subheadings just don't add anything. And honestly, they're a little off-putting and jarring and kind of take you out the story a bit. So I just started skipping over them, to be honest, but whatever. Anyway, they're my kind of big general thoughts. If you just wanted a kind of like summary of my thoughts on this book and my review, there you go. That's it done. You don't need to watch any further. But if you want to come with me on this journey and deep dive into the book, let's start with chapter 1. So in chapter 1, we are introduced to Asher Joel, who I think is supposed to be our main hero, but honestly, he doesn't really do much in the book, and I've not really heard much of him or seen much of him, despite his face being literally the entire cover. This is Asher. And I know because the book has pictures, and it labels all the characters, so look, here's Cheyenne with a tub of jam. Here's old Mary, who does nothing and then dies. So the book has pictures. And in this first chapter, we get some attempts of world building as well. So we find out what kind of world these characters are living in, and the threats that they face, and so on. It opens up with Asher sitting in a cafe, and we're told that Yellowstone volcano in Yellowstone National Park is causing a bunch of earthquakes, and it's probably due to erupt any day now. This is the only mention of this in the first 100 pages, so it's kind of thrown in there to give some context, but then never mentioned again, so maybe it'll come back later, I don't know. But conveniently, Asher's brother is a government volcanologist, so he and Asher know exactly what's going on, but there's a big conspiracy and the government is trying to cover it up, and they're not telling the public how serious it is, but God knows. Basically, I think she just wanted to put some conspiracy theories in there from the beginning and make it seem like, you know, the government's out there trying to get everyone killed. Asher also contemplates the bombings mentioned in the local newspaper, because apparently people are getting used to them now, they're so common. But Asher's worried about what the locals call the Muslim invasion. Debi literally writes, "It muffled every aspect of their lives. It happened gradually. The influx of Arab-speaking Muslims into their small coastal area of Washington state. But now the fear subdued all their life's joys and trials. Even grief." So straight up, the Islamophobia and fear-mongering is strong here. But honestly, this is pretty light compared to the rest of the book. This is going easy on him. We find out that Asher has a very personal and not at all ridiculous reason to hate all Muslims in the world ever. And that's because Muslims killed his friend Dan. Actually, they say that Dan was more than a friend. And I thought, at first, I was like, aye, more than a friend, eh? But it turns out, no, he was just a father figure, not his gay lover. Just sad. I think the latter would have been far more entertaining, but here we are. There's just a lot of like hyperbole in this first section, and it's trying so hard to be emotive, but it's just a little laughable. Oh God, it falls flat. Like a solitary tear slid down Asher's face, a manifestation of his loss. Men like Dan, who worked hard all their lives, had old-time values, and were American to the core. Men like Dan died when they stood up for what they believed. Too much knowledge is deafening. It screams at your soul, not allowing you to enjoy music, laughter, dreams, or even the thought of a good woman. Oh my god. Almost as if it were an omen, he caught a fleeting glance of scurrying Muslim men rushing off to where they would kneel together towards Mecca. A deep furrow appeared between his eyes. His hands doubled up into hard fists. This much anger was not good for the soul. And this is crazy because this kind of anger towards literally any Muslim for just going about their daily life is horrific, and it's literally glorified and encouraged throughout the whole book. It is so hateful that it genuinely gets difficult to read. Like in this little scene here, you literally have ordinary people going about their lives, maybe on their way to mosque, maybe not, who knows? They might just be going home, they might be popping to the shop. Doesn't matter. And it causes so much anger and disgust and hatred in both the character of Asha and clearly the author, and that is a little bit terrifying to read, if I'm honest. When I first read this chapter, I made this note of the fact that she described the Muslim men as scurrying. And I was like, well, the connotations here of them being like rats, of them being like vermin, of them being some kind of plague or pest, I was like, that's like subtle but horrible. And I was like making notes about this and stuff. I was like, this really tells us a lot about her unconscious biases. And then the more I read on, I was like, no, these aren't unconscious biases. These are just flat out conscious hate. You know, this, describing them as scurrying, is tame for Debi compared to the rest of the book. So Asha starts talking to this waitress in the little diner he's in about Dan, the guy who died. And the way she writes her speech is like something out of Sharon Lester's book. I don't know if you remember when I reviewed that, but it's all very odd. Debi really writes dialect in this really over-the-top, possibly offensive way. I don't know. I don't know if people would be offended by this, I'm not sure. But it's a very over-the-top way, and it's very kind of jarring and odd, and it's hard to read, I'll be honest. So she literally writes, the first line for the waitress is, "Showa, honey, it's Guad Fuad." That's how it's written. Anyway, this waitress is all like, in whatever her accent is, saying, basically Dan was a hero. He'd pray out loud no matter how many Muslims were around. What a hero. And again, we have this weird double standard here. Because, is Debi aware of how hypocritical she is? Because she's just gone on a hateful rant about Muslim men just walking past a window and how that's somehow an invasion of privacy and this and bad, and it's, well, maybe not invasion of privacy, but she's like, this is awful, this is bad, this is the worst thing they can do, to just walk past someone, and she's like horrible about that. And yet here, those men are literally going about their lives and not bothering anyone, just going to go pray in private as they do, nothing wrong with that. And yet here, she's making out Dan to be a hero for loudly praying in front of everyone in public and shoving his religion in everyone else's face and making a living out of trying to convert every single person in the world to his religion. And yet you'd rather, I apparently hate these men who are just going about their lives and worshipping in private and keeping to themselves. The hypocrisy. And then for some reason we get the waitress's backstory, even though she's never heard of again, and it's generic backstory. It's the same as every other woman in the book. Basically, she used to do drugs on the street before a good Christian man, Dan, saved her and showed her God. And this is the same story as most female characters have in the book. So we already kind of got a brief mention of it with Omar's wife, who we haven't actually met yet, so I don't know if she comes into it, but that's her backstory as well. Old Mary, it's her backstory. One of the other characters that we'll meet later, it's her backstory. Half the women at least have this same backstory where they did drugs and then a good man showed them God. And then we're introduced to, and I quote, the Arab man, sometimes known as the Arab-looking man, I'm not even joking, who apparently used to stalk Dan, and the waitress thinks that he's the one who killed him, and now he's stalking Asha. It literally is like cartoon villain stuff. It's ridiculous. We also learn in this chapter that Dan worked for this company called The Last Publishers, which is a fictional Christian publisher at the heart of this book, which I think is meant to be like the equivalent of No Greater Joy and their publishing and ministries and stuff. The self-insert and everything. And he issued, and I quote, a bold challenge to the local Muslim mosque. It says, The old man had proven he cared deeply for the Muslim youth by cashing in all his stocks and using the money to finance the translation of the God Story book. 2 words. It's like translation of the God Story book into the Arab tongue. Then he had hired a webmaster to create a site with God's story in all 5 dialects of Arabic. Old Dan then passed out thousands of business cards in the local school containing the web address where the Muslim youth could read the truth. I just have no words for the lack of awareness in this book and the utter disrespect and just everything. If someone was coming into my private spaces and like forcing their religion on me and like pushing it in my face and telling me everything I believed was wrong, yeah, I'd get offended too. There's a lot more awful stuff with the waitress complaining about Muslims, again I quote, taking over the area. And then Debbie adds in some footnotes to complain about this happening in the real world too. Apparently Muslims are taking over and they have an agenda and something offensive. And then we learn that Asher is going to be moving to Tennessee to take over Dan's job. And I have no idea what Asher was doing before all of this, or what he was doing with his life, where he was living, whatever. But apparently now Dan's dead, he can just drop everything in his own life and become Dan. That's a thing, apparently. We're just supposed to accept that without question. Okay. And then the waitress gets really creepy. Oh my god, this bit. And she's like, hey, the last publishers, I read their magazines. Sometimes they post pictures of this one particular girl who works for them. And she says, this is a direct quote from the book, we all figured you would court that gal in the magazine. Now she is cute. I've been praying for that Tennessee girl, Cheyenne. I think she's the one for you. Debbie continues a little bit. She, meaning the waitress, wasn't the only one who had noticed the pictures of Cheyenne. Asher had noticed them too. Louise was right. She was a beauty. He had found her on www.threadtree.com and corresponded with her after he decided to move to Tennessee. I mean, this is creepy as hell, right? You see a girl in a magazine and then you stalk her, like, with the intention of trying to date her. I mean, it's a bit weird, but the way it's written is just... it does make me laugh. It's quite funny. And with that, that's the end of chapter 1. That's it. As chapter 2 starts, we are introduced to Mary and Henry, an old married couple. Mary, this woman, you will not be surprised to know, used to be on the streets, and she used to do drugs, and she used to be a prostitute until a good Christian man, Henry, came along and saved her and introduced her to God. So again, same generic backstory. It's like there's one kind of woman in this book and that's it. I mean, literally we're 10 pages into the book and our only 2 female characters have the same backstory. With Mary and Henry, don't worry about them. You don't need to get attached to them at all because all they do is stalk a teenager for a while and then die. So, I'm not even joking. Not even joking. But that said, I think they're important to talk about because they're the first of many examples of good Christian people in this book who apparently have good intentions and want to help people and then never actually do anything. It's all a lot of praying and looking and watching, but no action. Never any actual action. Basically, all that happens in this second chapter is that they drive out to a rough part of town and they watch a teenage prostitute from across the street. And I mean, this bit definitely reads as kind of predatory, right? Henry and Mary found a quiet place to park their ancient black car in the shadows in a very rundown section of town. Across the street, girls paraded their wares, waiting to be picked up by men. A very young, childlike girl with long pale hair stepped up to the curb. That's our little Mary, Henry spoke softly. I wonder what her real name is. No matter. God knows. We can call her our little Mary. Henry's dear Mary began to pray as tears rolled down her lined face. God, merciful, loving, forgiving Saviour, save this wretched little Mary who now stands on the street of Sodom. And then the chapter ends. It's really creepy, I'll be honest. Like, these two pop up a few more times in the book, and each time they just go out there and they watch her as she, a teenager, a child, continues to be picked up by men and used and abused. And they just watch. And they say, really hope someone helps her. And then that's it. Never once do they do anything to help her. Never once do they act. It's very odd. Now, this girl that they're watching at this point, she becomes the main character later, and you'll notice a recurring pattern with her. And one is that these good Christian people, as they all think they are, none of them actually care what her real name is. They have no respect for what she wants to be called and what her name is and what she chooses her name to be or anything like that. They literally all just force names on her. So like here they call her Little Mary, but later on you'll notice others like, well actually there's a really horrible thing that this character Cheyenne says to her, but we'll get to that at the end as well. And the second thing is that no one actually ever wants to help her. They just expect other people to do it. And they pray about it a lot. And they're like, oh, yeah, someone help her. And that's it. And the third thing is that this is clearly a young kid. Like a really young girl who has clearly been through a lot. She's experienced trauma. And everyone just blames her for it. Everyone is really, really judgmental to her, about her. And everyone just blames her. And doesn't think that maybe, you know, she's a product of whatever world she grew up in. And the thing is, it's understandable, like her behaviour sometimes. She clearly gets scared and angry and lashes out. And, I mean, yeah, that's something she needs to work on, but it's very understandable for a character like her. But the way she's written and the way she's treated by other characters is absolutely disgusting. But again, we'll get to that later. As we move on to chapter 3, nothing happens except Asher goes on a morning walk in Tennessee because he's moved here now. It's kind of a big time jump. And he starts praying about Cheyenne in the forest, and it is seriously like r/men writing women Christian edition. Like, so this is just a man on his own in a forest. Asher felt his heart race as his mind fastened on Malachi's youngest daughter. That girl always made his heart beat fast. Oh Lord, that gal is fine. She is mighty, mighty fine. And as far as I've read in this book, Asher's age is never actually given, but Cheyenne is said to be about 22. And what I find really creepy about this is because there's pictures in this book of like the real people who these characters are based on, like they look like drawings, but they're not. They're clearly just photos with a filter on them. And what's creepy is that this is meant to be Asher. And this young girl here on the cover, who looks about 14 maybe, and he definitely looks like mid-30s, I'd say. I don't know, I'm a bad judge of age. But they look way, you know, wrong. Yeah, so this is this like 30-something-year-old looking man talking about a 15-year-old looking 22-year-old. And it's just a little creepy. A little bit creepy. I really could have done without the pictures in this book, I'll be honest. Also, the fact that throughout the book she's referred to like as a young girl and a kid and all that kind of stuff. It's gross. It's really gross. Chapter 4 is when something finally happens, and we're finally introduced to Cheyenne and her family, and we find out what the last publishers are actually doing, and it's more than just printing books. So there's a lot of backstory in this chapter, and a lot of just explaining stuff to the reader, but it's done in a really, really bizarre way. So, you know, usually when you read a book and they need to tell you all this backstory, or they're trying to like introduce a setting or characters or people or whatever, it's normally done in a way where maybe you'll want to like introduce a new character to a situation and then have other characters explain all the background and stuff to them. Like that's fairly common and it works quite well. So like think about like TV series, for example, where like, you know, someone hires a new employee and they have to go around and meet all their co-workers, and that's how the viewer's introduced to all the characters essentially. A lot of books do similar things to that, where they're like, you know, someone new is introduced to a part of the world, and as they learn about it, the reader learns about it. This happens in like even your basic books, like Harry Potter. We learnt about the wizarding world because Harry didn't know he was a wizard, and then he found out when he was older and he went to Hogwarts, and he is a new outsider introduced to that setting, and as he learns, we learn. I'm trying to think of other things. Another book that I literally like recently just read was like The House in the Cerulean Sea, and it was lovely. I really enjoyed that book. But again, there we're introduced to the characters who live in the house, in the home, and all the little and basically like the little family unit. We're introduced to them through an outsider coming in to do an inspection. And so as the outsider is introduced to this, essentially a family, we're introduced to the family, and that's how it works. It makes sense. And so in this case, what I thought Debbie was going to do is Asher is introduced to these like publishers, and he's the outsider, and he comes in and he meets everyone and he learns about their backstory firsthand, and people tell him stuff and people tell him about the work. That's what I thought was going to happen. That's what I thought Asher's role would be in this book, and it's not. It's really, really weird. So instead of them explaining their work to Asher and therefore to us, the reader, apparently he just shows up and meets everyone and gets to know them all off page. So we never see his introduction to them, and so our introductions to the characters are really stunted and weird and unnatural, and all the explanation and backstory stuff is done in a really bizarre way. So to give you like a quick summary, right? Hope, the mother, and the Debi Pearl character, has created this jam, which is a miracle cure for everything in the world ever. And they're trying to manufacture it and sell it. And I'll read you more of the ridiculous details in a minute. But instead of Hope and Cheyenne explaining this to Asher and therefore the reader, Hope explains it all to her daughter, who already seems to know it anyway because she's been working with her mum to make this jam anyway. And then Cheyenne then goes away and mulls it all over in her head and repeats a lot of it to herself. And then Asher shows up and is like, what are you doing here? And they repeat it all to him again without adding any new information. So we essentially get this whole backstory explained 2.5-ish times to us with all the same information. And it's weird. It's pointless. It's boring. And it's done so unnaturally. The conversations between Hope and Cheyenne it's bad. I have a huge problem with so much of Cheyenne's dialogue in this book because no one ever talks like this, ever. This is how a character's introduced, right? Cheyenne Freeman was full of delight as her truck approached the old bridge that led into the Freeman's property. Whew! I love my new truck. Everybody loves you, even Asher. He just has a problem with Pink. Pinky, yes! I'll call you Pinky. Wow, we are so cool. She gracefully exited the vehicle and loped up the steep drive. The hope of finding true love, the joy of being alive, and youthful hormones pulsed through her body. On impulse, she screamed with pleasure as she ran, announcing her arrival to her mother. No one acts like this, and if they do, they're insufferable and gross. She's literally talking to her truck saying, "Oh wow, we're so cool, Pinky, my pink truck," and then just screams for no reason in the middle of nowhere. No one does that. Cheyenne is described as looking both artistic and trendy without conscious effort, because of course she is. And then we're told that Cheyenne's Indian heritage was easily seen in her features, and call me naive, I genuinely thought this meant she was an Indian woman until I read like a little bit further on, and I realised that every time Debbie says Indian, she actually means Native American, and that Debbie is throwing like every single stereotype she can into this book. And now like, I'm not Native American, so I don't know if this next part is offensive to people or how much any of this is offensive, but all I can say is I felt uncomfortable reading it. So as an example, Cheyenne is described, small children that had seen animated movies about Pocahontas sometimes mistook Cheyenne for a living, breathing version of the Indian maiden. Later in the book she's described again, Asher was momentarily mesmerized by her appearance. Again, he took note of how strong her Indian ancestral roots were. The high cheekbones, the exotic nose, the smooth olive skin, and her long, lanky body folded into a relaxed squat, with her arms sticking straight out, elbows resting on her knees as she studied the jars, all spoke of her Indian heritage. I think the issue I have with it is, like, throughout the book, it just feels a lot like they're fetishizing her race. So rather than it just being a part of her and her character, and her being a character who's Native American, it feels like they're almost like fetishizing her appearance, and I don't know, maybe I'm wrong. It felt uncomfortable to read, but maybe that's just me. Anyway, back to the story. So Cheyenne and Hope go on to joke about how it's so awful that she is 22 and still unmarried. How shocking, how horrifying, how disgusting. How dare a 22-year-old be unmarried? And it's genuinely worrying to these women because, as her mother says, there's nothing more important than love. Ridiculous. So Cheyenne starts in the least natural way possible, narrating what her mum's berry-making room looks like to her mum. So she stands there in a room with her mum and says, "Mum, this is everything I can see around me." Very weird. So we're told, "It's a real science lab," she said, glancing at the tall locked cabinets and computerized testing units. "Of course, your microscope is kind of old, but at least it's mounted on its very own table. I love your willow baskets of dried herbs and flowers hanging from the ceiling. It makes the place smell like earth. This place is like new tech mixed with old herbal medicine. So weirdly cool." It's like a science lab being described by someone who's never actually been in a science lab, isn't it? So anyway, then it's explained that these two women are making berry mash, which is just like a fancy jam, and they're going to be mass producing it in China to sell to everyone as a miracle cure. They describe it as the perfect rejuvenator. And apparently it's so good that it cured her dad's blindness or something, and they plan to make millions off this miracle cure so they can print more Bibles in different languages to convert the world to Christianity. There's a lot of really weird stuff about how, like, well, you know, they're not selling the most, like, potent version of this jam. They're selling a weaker one because it means that people will have to have a dose every day to keep them young and healthy. And I'm like, oh, how convenient. It just means people are going to have to buy more and they're going to make more money, aren't they? It's very odd. The technical details of their business plan are morally questionable, and also from a business perspective, a little bit dodgy, I'll be honest. I say that as an ex-business student. But I mean, it's bizarre because, like, if there really was some cure-all miracle jam, and these are supposed to be good Christian people, then, like, wouldn't they just want to give it away for free? Why would they, like, hold this and keep it to themselves? And why would they be trying to, like, sell it for so much money and profit and trying to make millions out of it? Like, I know they say they're doing it because they're going to put the money back into printing Bibles, but I think curing the world, curing cancer, this thing can apparently cure cancer, like, helping people stay healthy is a bit more important than converting them to your religion. And anyway, surely if this really was a miracle cure given to them by God, because that's another thing they talk about, there's a whole thing about how something tree of life and God's life force and whatever gave them this jam. Surely the existence of a miracle jam from God would be enough to convert people rather than Bibles in another language, you know? Flaws. There's many flaws in this. As they go on, Cheyenne asks, "The Chinese chemists that work for Mr. Cohen, won't they be able to figure out that we have something more than just another health food tincture? What's to keep them from selling the recipe to another health food company, or even using it to promote their nationalistic agenda?" You can't make this stuff up, can you? Well, actually, yeah, no, apparently Debbie did make this stuff up, but, like, what goes on in her mind? I'm just shocked. And this is where it all starts to descend into kind of, like, chaos and ridiculousness and conspiracies and, like, sci-fi magic madness, all portrayed by Debbie as though this could actually be real, because she has these footnotes with, like, you know, the healing properties of pomegranate and, like, how certain berries will heal you of certain things and stuff. It's bizarre. Lots of Bible quotes to back up her claims as well. Hope says, "There is a life force in the DNA that has not been identified. It is the combination of herbs and berries that gives us an edge. Somehow, I think by the will of God, we have happened upon a combination that closely approximates the properties of the tree of life. It's not only the combination, it's the process we employ that causes a chemical reaction producing an entirely new substance." And then they speak about their plan more, and Cheyenne's dad saying, he will be able to prioritize outreach to Muslims. At the mention of Muslims, Cheyenne's knees felt weak. A cold shudder shook her insides. She looked down at her hands, trying to hide her dread. Daily there was news of bombings, personal assaults, and even poisoning from the hands of Muslim terrorists. Muslims were now focusing more of their attacks on churches and prominent Christians. This wasn't just a faceless fear. This fear struck Cheyenne in a much more personal way. So ridiculous and harmful, this narrative that they're spreading. It's so hyperbolic and dehumanizing and damaging. They can't just demonize literally millions of people in this way and say that they're all terrible, bad. They can't call millions of people terrorists just because they share a religion. It's ridiculous. So then they revealed that as well as their main miracle jam that they're trying to mass produce and sell, They have this second jam, another one which is even more special, but they have less of it. And this thing is so cool and so great and so powerful that it can literally bring things back from the dead. Anyway, throughout this entire discussion and stuff, some stalker has been watching them from outside or something, and he has a listening device or whatever. And his little interjections into the story are gross and disturbing. And now writing a creepy stalker character is difficult because you want to make him sound creepy and get that across without it sounding like you, the author, are getting off on all the creepy stuff that you're writing, you know? John Fowles does a really excellent job of this in his book, The Collector, which is a wonderfully dark book. I love it. It's beautifully written. It's a fantastic, compelling story, and it is terrifying. And I thoroughly recommend it. But he manages to have a character essentially stalking and kidnapping someone and narrate his actions and try and justify them and be creepy as hell. He manages to do that without ever glorifying it or romanticizing it or sounding like he as an author is kind of a little bit into it. Do you know what I mean? He manages to separate the character's voice from his voice, and it's done in a very good way, done very well. Debi, on the other hand, it almost just seems like she gets off on this stuff that she writes, and it just leaves me feeling a bit icky, if I'm honest. It's not nice to read at all. So, let me read you a few excerpts. One of our first descriptions of his actions is, lustful, beady eyes drank in the young woman's form. Hidden on the slope behind the farmhouse, the rotund man snickered to himself as he adjusted his listening device. He exhaled his malicious intentions. Okay, hopey dopey. Just say where you keep your stash of miracle cure so I can get what I need to be the man again. Yeah, and do your little girl. I might be gentle with her. Nah, on second thought, it ain't fun without the screams. So gross. That's not even the worst of it. It gets far more graphic and horrible. But we find out his name's Derek, and we're shown this photo of him, which is just weird. And I think it kind of undermines the whole, like, being scared of him thing. Because he's written in a really disturbing way, and he's shown to be dangerous. And basically, it's never outright said, but it's implied that he's impotent, and that he's trying to get this miracle cure so he can not be impotent and rape the daughter. And obviously this is a horrible thing, and it makes him dark and scary and dangerous. But all of this is undermined with this face. It makes him seem like a cartoon villain rather than an actual threat. The whole thing is just bizarre and not treated with the level of seriousness and respect it deserves. A man threatening rape deserves to be written with more seriousness and more consideration than this. It's a weird mix of him being portrayed as this bungling, incompetent fool who spills food down himself, and then 2 lines later he's pointing a gun at people and threatening to rape them. It doesn't work. The jarring juxtaposition undermines everything. His lines of dialogue are just odd too. Like, he let out a string of cursing. D #& you old hag. What the heck? Blankety blank dog made me do it. Now I'm real mad. How are we supposed to take this seriously? She literally wrote out the words, blankety blank dog. Meanwhile, Asher has been running around the forest with a gut feeling that something bad is going to happen. And this is something that happens a lot in the book. And again, it gets very frustrating. Rather than any characters thinking of things to themselves, rather than putting together any clues from what they've observed, rather than, making their own decisions, at random points in the book, the different characters get different gut feelings from God, or at one point, God literally speaks to one of them. And then they just act because God has sent them a message, and they just get this feeling and they have to go. And it's all just kind of a little too convenient, and it doesn't make an interesting book, I'll be honest. Like, these characters never have to be aware of their own surroundings or think for themselves, because God just makes the decisions for them. So anyway, Asher has this bad feeling about Cheyenne, and he goes running off into the forest to save her from this unknown threat. And while he's there, he just starts shouting about Cheyenne for no reason to God. So running around the woods by himself, he shouts, Lord, you know I would love to have that woman. God, just to hold her in my arms, talk to her, Watch her expression change. Lord, that gal, it's getting harder and harder to resist her, which is slightly rapey. Smiling as he breathed in a deep, shaky breath, he threw his head back and shouted into the morning stillness, "Love to have that woman." Please tell me no one in the real world actually acts like this. And then as he's running through the forest with this gut feeling, shouting about how he wants to have that woman because he can't resist her anymore, he spots Creepy Derek through his binoculars just as he does something horrible. So Derek has been spying on Hope and Cheyenne. He's been threatening them to himself. And then he kills the family dog. And Ash is just watching from miles away through his binoculars, unable to do anything. And it's horrible. This scene is actually horrible. This is the most disgusting scene in the book because it's so graphic and violent. And that level of graphic violence is completely unnecessary. Like, violence against animals is horrible. And when it's included in books or TV or films or whatever, it's often included to show, you know, how bad and heartless and mean a person is. But often you can get that point across by just telling us that they hurt an animal or showing us, you know, other people's horror as they find the body or something like that. I've never seen it written in this much detail where it genuinely disturbed me and left me uncomfortable. And I wasn't uncomfortable because I felt like this character was bad. I mean, I did feel like the character was bad, but it made me uncomfortable because I was like, what kind of woman writes like this but does it in such a kind of like weirdly light way? I don't know if I'm explaining that properly, but it was unnecessary and it was horrible, and it wasn't treated with, again, the respect and the level of seriousness that it needed to be. I don't actually want to read out any of these passages about the dog's death because I think it's too graphic and it's too horrible, but I will pop the page on screen now if you want to have a pause and read it for yourself, but feel free to skip ahead. Okay, so moving on to chapter 5, and a lot of it's actually the same as the last chapter. I think these two chapters could have been condensed a lot and put together, and a lot of the crap cut out. But Cheyenne and Hope talk more about the miracle jam. They quote bits of the Bible to make it seem legit. They talk about how they need to be careful because people might try to steal it from them. You know, like Creepy Derek is literally waiting outside to try and do. And now they also go on about this extra special jam that can apparently create life and bring people back from the dead and so on, and how it shouldn't ever be sold. And Cheyenne isn't allowed to tell anyone about it for some reason. She's not allowed to tell people how it's made. They need to keep it themselves, blah, blah, blah. It just seems very selfish to me, but what do I know? The women, meanwhile, have no idea that their dog is dead or that they're being stalked. And meanwhile, Asha starts racing to them to try and get to them all in time. And at this point, it's supposed to be, like, really tense, I think. She's trying to make it kind of like, yeah, he's like an action hero racing through the forest. It doesn't feel tense. It just feels very weird and pointless, and I don't know. So Asha runs onto a nearby road and jumps into a car with two boys that he knows from the ministry stuff and the publishing stuff, and they drive up to where the women and the dead dog and Stalkman are, and Asha has this gun for some reason. He starts waving it around before going over to pick up the body of the dead dog. Asha claims that, "This morning I began to pray. A strong sense of unease came over me as if evil was near. I felt that God wanted me to keep walking and praying, waiting for him to show me what to do." And he claims that this is why he saw Derek kill the dog, because God wanted him to see. But if this is the case, why didn't God tell him or show him or direct him to the right place sooner, where he could have saved the dog? Like, I don't know. And I mean, you could argue that, well, maybe God can only give clues and can't be explicit, so, you know, it's not God's fault, it's Ash's fault for not understanding in time. But this isn't true, because God speaks to Hope and gives her very, very explicit commands a little bit later on, so that theory goes out the window. Truth is, God was just a bit of a douche and he didn't really care about the dog and he just let him suffer, apparently. God has this way of communicating in the book where, like, he does it at very convenient moments in a way that's convenient to the story, but there's no logic or pattern or reason to it. It's a useless plot device. Right, and here's where things get really confusing, right? Because they talk about Derek and they identify this creepy man as, like, being Derek, but at this point I think he's already run off or something, so they can't catch him or do anything, and I don't know. And because of this picture of Derek in the book, right, this is clearly like a 50 or 60-year-old man, right? That's not just me, like, it's like a creepy old man. But when Asher and the boys start talking about him, they make it sound like he's in like his teens or his 20s or something. And I don't understand why you include pictures like this if they don't match up with what's in the text. So they literally say like, his dad's the sheriff, his granddaddy's the judge. So Derek gets away with everything no matter who he hurts. He never has to answer to anybody. Bunch of white supremacists, the lot of them controlling this county. Weird. And then, just to top it all off, they claim that Derek is a paid assassin for the KKK. Because of course he is. So this 20 to 60-year-old man whose granddad is the judge is a paid assassin for the KKK, and he's impotent, so he's trying to steal miracle jam so he can rape a bunch of women. See, this is an issue that I actually have, right? Because when you go so over the top with your, like, villains, like, when you write someone like this who is, like, a rapist and a danger to women, and is racist and a danger to all people, essentially. Like, when you write these villainous characters in such an over-the-top, cartoonish, laughable way, it really undermines the fact that their values, their misogyny and their racism, it completely undermines the fact that they are genuine threats in the real world and they are bad. Because the fact is that, because rapists mostly don't run around saying, I'm gonna rape women, and racists don't go around being paid assassins for the KKK and being all like, ha ha ha, let me say racist stuff because I'm a racist. The fact is that most of the dangerous people are far more subtle and kind of insidious and dangerous for reasons because we can't easily identify them. And making kind of cartoonish villains out of these very real issues, I think it does more damage than anything else. I don't know if I explained that point right, but you know what I'm trying to say? So Asher and the boys go visit Cheyenne and Hope, and Cheyenne goes down to the cellar to shake some jam. I'm not even joking. And Asher tells Hope that he saw Derek kill her dog, and in the most bizarre reaction ever. As she listened, Hope's countenance clouded into anger, then changed to confusion, finally moving on to relief. Hope slapped her hands together almost in glee. So someone is spying. I figured as much. Now, like, I don't care even if you have miracle jam that can bring things back from the dead. 1, your dog suffered. You should be upset by that. And 2, shouldn't your first response be, oh my god, can I see her and how I save her? Not, ha ha ha, told you so, I'm being spied on. It's a very bizarre reaction and it's heartless and I hate it. It's just gross and disrespectful. And as it turns out, she doesn't even know if the jam can actually revive living things. She just thinks it can at this point. So then she's like, well, Wiggles, you're the guinea pig again. Only this time, there's nothing left to lose. You sure look like a goner. So it seems to me they've been experimenting on the dog for a while. And this whole lack of empathy in general is just disturbing as hell. So while Hope is experimenting on her poor dead dog, Asher heads down to the cellar to see Cheyenne, and we get 3 or 4 pages of them just repeating everything that we got in the last chapter and a half, where Asher's told all the same stuff that Cheyenne just spoke at her mother about and so on. It's an actual waste of paper. But we do get this disturbing bit of information thrown on at the end. So Asher asks them if they've conducted like proper scientific tests for any of their jams, and Cheyenne replies, only a little with the few people who know what we're doing. Those that have invested in the company. 2 of them have reversed heart disease, and 1 saw his wife's cancer remitted. And I mean, I know this is a complete work of fiction, but Debbie's claiming this is like based on facts. And so what I think she's actually trying to imply to her audience here is that, like, if you have these really serious life-threatening conditions, eat some berries. It's all good. I genuinely think it's a little bit dangerous. But anyway, she goes on. And Cheyenne says, Rob advised us to opt out of clinical trials. It would be impossible to keep everything under wraps if hundreds of people became involved and started reporting similar results as Dad and Rob. So they don't want to do clinical trials because that will alert everyone to know they have an actual miracle cure, and then too many people would know about it, and then they might not be able to make as much money. Their selfishness. Ooh, I hate it. And then they head back upstairs and, oh look, miracle, the dog is alive. So, good. But then the dog's never mentioned again. Can't believe she killed a dog. Anyway, sorry. Moving on to chapter 6. And in this chapter, God stops talking in riddles and just outright speaks to Hope in the night. he gives her very, very specific instructions. Why he can't do this throughout the whole book, I'll never know. There's no logic to any of this. But God wakes Hope up in the middle of the night and tells her, take 2 clean 6-gallon buckets and 1 length of 36-inch tubing. You heard it here first, people. God uses the imperial system. Screw metric, millimeters are the devil's measurements. You'll find it on the pantry shelf, God tells her. So we now know that God is actually like Santa. He knows when you're sleeping, he knows when you're awake, he knows if you've been bad or good, and he knows what you keep on your pantry shelves. Take it downstairs, siphon the juice off the top of all 22 gallons of brew and fill the buckets. Take the 2 big buckets to your lab. You must add 2 drops of the contents of the small dropper bottle, and okay, it's boring, it goes on. He gives very specific instructions, like do this, and then do this, and then do this, and then do this, and take this here, and put it here, and send it to here, and it goes on for like a page. Basically, he just gives her these really long, detailed instructions to move the jam around, add the special miracle jam to the regular jam, and then ship it all off like to this other place around the world, to this other person who apparently needs it, but also is kind of hiding it from the bad guys who want to steal it from here. And so, yeah, Hope just gets up in the middle of the night and works and works and works and works and works all by herself and has no sleep. And meanwhile, her husband's upstairs, fast asleep. And the next morning, he has the cheek to get up and say to his exhausted, sleep-deprived wife, "Man, did I sleep well. I can't remember a night I slept so heavy." So Asher arrives to cart off the jam to the airport, and on the way back he's followed by the Muslim terrorists in the car who have apparently found him here and are now stalking him here. He gets out his gun, waves around a bit, they vanish. Meanwhile, Derek comes back to try and break into the lab again, only to find all the jam is gone. Oh no, looks like God saved the day. End of the chapter. That was kind of a boring one, not a lot happened there. Chapter 7, and we're back to Henry and Mary. Remember the old people who were stalking the troubled teenage prostitute? You know, stalking but never helping. Well, they're back, and they're watching her again, and doing nothing, again. And then Henry dies, peacefully, in his sleep. Okay. So then Mary is put in a care home, and while she's in the care home, she's visited by an angel. Like, literally visited by an angel. And it's just done in such a, like, blasé way. It's like, so Mary did this, and she's speaking to her carer, and the carer left, and then there's an angel there, and the angel says to her, and then Mary says this. That is it. Like, it's just so, like, bleh. Like, this is a normal thing, just like angels visiting you. So Mary prays, and the angel standing nearby readied himself to dispatch her prayers heavenward. His form was large and powerful. The invisible warrior of God now leaned over the old lady, ministering comfort to her heart. Mary, just keep praying. But if angels can do this and they're so powerful and they're actually here on earth and like interacting with us and stuff, why is he just telling this old lady to keep praying? Why can't he actually go out and save this child who is clearly being abused and exploited? Like, why not help a child and not just stand around whispering in old ladies' ears? And not that it matters, but spoiler alert, in the next chapter, Mary dies peacefully in her old age, having done absolutely nothing to further on this plot or do anything or interact with any of the characters. There's just no reason for her and Henry to be in this at all, other than they stalk a teenager, they pray, they die. That's it. Why bother with any of these characters? Moving on to chapter 8, and out of nowhere we're just introduced to Omar, this completely new character, who is driving down a busy road filled with traffic on his way to teach a Bible class at the publishing place. And on his way he spots a hitchhiker, and it's pretty clear that this is the same girl who was working as a prostitute who the old couple were stalking. And now call me crazy, but when I see a person in trouble, like a homeless person or, you know, even a hitchhiker or whatever, I think, poor person, how can I help them? Or how can I get someone else to help them? Or whatever. Like, I think, like, I bet they need support. I wonder what got them in this situation. I wonder if they're okay. I wonder, you know, why they're in this position. That kind of thing. You know, you have a little bit of human compassion and you consider these things. You don't just call them names. And God, the names that she's called in this book and the way she's described, it's incredibly rude and disrespectful and dehumanizing, and it's gross. Like, you can't help every person in need that you see, like, that's absolutely impossible for a person, but you can at least have a bit more compassion than is put forward in this book. Do you know what I mean? There's far too many instances of lines like this with, like, his eyes were drawn back to the pathetic girl. She couldn't be more than 16, yet her stance and expression showed a tiredness beyond her years. Bone dog tired. Turning his face, he began to review the text for tonight's meeting. So at this point, he sees her, acknowledges that she's struggling and needs help, and just chooses to ignore her and think about his Bible class instead. And then he starts talking to himself and praying to God, because that's what all the characters do in this book, and it's the only way we ever know what they're thinking or feeling or who they are. So he starts talking about his Bible class, and he says, "I'll bet some skeptics are ready with their questions tonight. Yes, sirree, I sure like to be prepared when I meet folks who don't believe the book," all capital letters. "They worship the edumacation." I'm not even joking, that's edumacation. "It's good to know God's irrefutable truth." This is some of the most ridiculous dialogue I've ever read, up there with Cheyenne's, "Wow, we are so cool," and stuff. Actually, this is worse than that, isn't it? Edumacation. His attention is pulled away from himself for a second and back to the struggling teenager, and he says, "Lord, that white girl is pale. I do believe that is the whitest white I ever did see. Sick, Lord, she looks sick. Help her, Lord." Or, you're right there. You could help her yourself. But instead, he literally just sits and tries to pray for anyone else but him to help her. And it goes on for over 2, nearly 3 pages of him literally just saying, "Someone help that poor girl. Lord, send someone to help her. I'm asking in Jesus' name," and so on. And he literally goes through, looking at all these other people. He's like, family in the car, you help her. Couple, you help her. He properly, goes through and points out to everyone else, and he's, begging them in his head for them to help her so he doesn't have to. And apparently he doesn't want to do it himself because he says, "Lord, you know how much is at stake. The last publisher is at a critical time in publishing. This is just one rebellious girl who's probably heard the gospel 1,000 times and rejected it. So now he's just making up excuses to make himself feel better. If I pick up a white girl, it could jeopardize the whole project." And at this point, I'm like, what, why, how is helping one person going to stop anything? And then this next sentence, it all became clear. "1 million Muslim souls are at stake, and all it would take is one lily-white teenage girl crying foul. The whole thing would be derailed while everyone at the last publishers tried to defend me. God, you know she's going to cry foul." And this just had me speechless. Basically, he won't help someone clearly in need in case they make a false rape accusation about him. And I mean, why would she do that? Why does this sound like someone who's trying to discredit a woman by saying, look, before she says anything, she'll probably lie and say I assaulted her? This sounds like he's trying to discredit someone who he's planning to assault or that he's already assaulted. Do you know what I mean? It just sits wrong with me. It's gross. This whole mindset is just so messed up. The way it reads to me is that it's almost like rape and sexual assault allegations are so common amongst these communities, and that Debi writing this has heard so many accusations, but would rather believe that the women making these claims are making it up because they're rebellious and whatever. She would rather believe that than believe that any of the men she knows are capable of raping or assaulting women. It's a lot of victim blaming, and it's these same people who would rather believe there are so many false accusations than they would believe that men are capable of raping and assaulting women. You know what I mean? It's a bit gross. Omar tells God about his time in prison and that he has a wife and 4 kids, and when no one else will help this girl, sitting slumped and defeated, Omar whispered, "Okay, God, I'll offer her a ride." What a good, kind Christian who was out of all other options. So it turns out this teenager's holding a baby, so she needed even more help. And the whole car ride is just bizarre because, when he offers her a ride, he doesn't speak to her like a human being. He doesn't say, hi, hello, how are you? Doesn't ask her name, nothing. She's clearly scared and terrified, and he just doesn't treat her as human. So, apparently she, asks him for food, and he just responds by letting out this weird, loud laugh noise out of nowhere, and she's understandably scared. And, the way it's written, the girl skittishly glanced at him, moving away as if suddenly afraid. Which, can you not blame her for this reaction? If you're like, I'm hungry, can I have some food? And this man just laughs in your face, like this strange man who's bigger than you, and you're in his car and completely at his mercy, you would be scared. But instead, Debbie writes, he shook his head at the incongruity of the situation. Who's more afraid, me or her? Probably me. She looks mean. This is ridiculous. You're an adult man, probably several times bigger than her. And she's an underweight, probably, it seems, malnourished, homeless teenager with a baby. Who's really more scared in that situation? Because I don't think it's going to be him. Like, the worst you can say is that she might say something mean. The worst you could do to her that she's probably terrified of is that you rape and assault and murder her. I'm going to guess she's more scared. What a selfish man. He's not even real and I hate him. Debbie tries to make us feel sorry for him as well, right? Omar could feel the sweat gather on his forehead. The hair on the back of his neck prickled with potential danger, while his mind engaged in private conversation. Oh no, you don't. God made me pick you up and you'd better behave yourself. I mean it. Don't you even think of crying foul. Don't you dare try and take advantage of this circumstance. I've seen that look before. I'm just going to say it now. Both this character and Debbie, incredibly messed up individuals. Like, so this kid is obviously scared and defensive and he's just plain rude to her, and he orders her stuff like, you wipe that sassy face off, girl, and get out of the car this minute. You owe a little thankfulness right now and best you remember it. He just seems scary, to be honest. I would be scared of this man. And they go inside the Bible group where, and I quote, Asher watched dumbfounded as he watched an edgy Omar enter the herb den, escorting a small, pale teenage girl carrying a tightly wrapped baby. Prayer automatically came to his heart. Lord, he must be scared. Give us wisdom. Help us, Lord. He must be scared. What the hell is wrong with these people? She must be scared. And then at the end of the chapter, like I say, old Mary died, and that's just it. Chapter 9. Chapter 9, Cheyenne tries to look after our runaway teenager, and by look after, I mean she's judgy and bitchy and rude to her. She takes this kid to the kitchen and offers her food as you would, and this young girl is clearly half-starved. God knows when the last time she ate. And yeah, as she eats the food that she's been offered, Cheyenne struggled with irritation as she watched the girl eat almost a whole plate of cookies meant for tonight's class. Irritation, really. I'm sorry, but 1, you offered them to her. Don't be surprised when she eats them. And 2, I'm pretty sure she needs them considerably more than you and your class do. You and your class can go out and get more cookies anytime you want. She's a homeless, malnourished teenager. God knows when she can get another meal. The girl tries to lie about her name, and Cheyenne is disgusted, which is an absolute overreaction. You don't know what danger this girl is in. You don't know what she's been through. If she wants to use a fake name, let her use a fake name. Ugh. And she gets so judgy, and she's like, oh, poor you. That's a bummer. I mean, you don't look like an Anne. No, you're a Mary Magdalene. Which is just basically saying you look like a prostitute. Rude. However, weirdly, it turns out the girl is called Magdalene, which is an odd name, but whatever. And she's shocked that Cheyenne guessed it, and in a panic, she throws her baby on the floor. I know, right? And when I read this, I'm like, what the hell? The baby's probably dead now. Are these people not worried? And apparently no one's really fazed by this, and it takes like a whole paragraph before we learn that the baby that got thrown on the floor isn't actually a baby, it's a doll. But before all that, like, there's this thing about Cheyenne looking into the girl's eyes and seeing, like, I'm like, screw her eyes, tell me about the dead baby. That thankfully isn't a dead baby, but a doll. But I was like, anyway. So at this point, turns out that this girl, this teenager, this kid has been like carrying this baby doll with her. And so at this point, my thoughts are like, well, clearly this girl's been through trauma. Maybe it's like a safety thing. Maybe she lost her own baby and this is a comfort thing. Maybe this doll is all she has left of her childhood. You know, sympathy, caring, thinking about people's motivations. But Cheyenne just mocks her for having a doll at her age. Rude. And she mocks her for the doll being so old and dirty, which is rude and unnecessary. Cheyenne, have a heart, you bitch. And we get a description of Magdalene. Her skin and her clothes have burns on them. Her hair's been cut. It was dyed months ago, but it started like growing out again. She's very thin. She's dirty. I mean, like, she's clearly been through a lot. And instead of having any sympathy or like, you know, heart, Debbie describes her as the picture of street trash, which is revolting to me. It's so unnecessary. while Cheyenne should be offering her, like, a chance to, like, shower and get herself clean and, like, giving her food, somewhere to stay, basic comfort, she decides to, like, treat this teenager as this, like, doll to dress up, and it's weird priorities and grossness. And Cheyenne says to her, "I have a great shower with lots of fancy, natural, girly soaps, creams, and shampoos, and I know how to cut and style hair. Anyway, by tomorrow, I could have you looking like a fancy New York City babe." It screams to me that she's so out of touch and clueless and ridiculous. But just as I was beginning to kind of, like, feel sorry for this Magdalene character, Debbie ruins this as well, because turns out she's homophobic. So, God, a dirty, suspicious face looked up at Cheyenne, trying to figure out the motive behind the kindness. Disgusted by her conclusions, Magdalene asked, "You queer? Why are there no decent human beings in this book? They're all terrible people and I hate them." And finally, chapter 10, not a huge amount to talk about in this one, because I'm getting a little exhausted at this, but this is the last one we're going to be looking at today. I know this is a long video, but there's a lot to it. Cheyenne has cut Magdalene's hair, and does a lot of calling her ugly, like, before the haircut, and all that. And while Debbie tries to paint Cheyenne as the good guy, they're both as bad as each other, and they're both awful in this chapter. "Spare me your stupid conversations about your freak friends." Magdalene's nasty response surprised Cheyenne. Cheyenne's answer seemed to have no rancor, but she felt like spitting in the girl's face. Cheyenne silently prayed for wisdom. Please cut away the ugliness from her soul, just like I cut away the ugly dyed hair, so she can see your love. So they're both horrible, nasty people. And this entire time, Cheyenne has been calling her kid instead of her name, Magdalene, and Magdalene asks her to stop. And so Cheyenne says, "Okay, not kid. I'll call you Mag, or Maggie, or girl, because your name is too long. Which will it be?" Rude! So at this point, it's like revealed that Ash has left to go to Thailand on this work thing, and Cheyenne says he's over there trying to reach the Hmong people by giving them the God storybook in their own language. It's a whole thing, apparently. And then Magdalene, or girl, as she's now settled for being called, responds with the most disgusting answer ever. And I'm going to warn you now, this is not pleasant to read. I know this girl's kind of being portrayed as a villain, and so this probably isn't Debi Pearl's view, but the fact that, I don't know, even the inclusion of this much hate in the book grosses me out so much. Because it's never specifically, like, said, this is wrong because, like, well, listen, it's disgusting. Yeah, what gets me is why they would even bother trying to reach a subrace. They sure as %% are not gonna be in heaven. After all, they're only half human. Like that black preacher of yours that picked me up doing his Christian duty for the day. Man, it's simple information I learnt in Sabbath school when I was 10 years old. People of colour, Africans, Asians, Arabs, they're not Aryan and therefore a subrace. You know much about the Garden of Eden? When Eve fell, then she got it on with Satan, a beast, and bred the subrace. It's one of the most disgusting things I've ever read. I mean, I read this and I was repulsed and shocked. But the thing is, Cheyenne's response is, I don't want to ever hear any more of that foul nonsense again. If I do, I will take you to the police. And this just is not the response I want to hear or see to this. Like, tell her outright she's wrong. Tell her why she's wrong. Put her in a place. Say, no such thing as a subrace. All races are equal. There's no sub, there's no this, there's no certain people came from a beast. Oh, revolting. Tell her it's wrong, tell her why it's wrong, and set her right, and make sure she understands all people are equal. Tell her that. Just say, don't say it or I'll take you to the police. That's not going to teach her anything, and that's not even condemning what she's saying all that much. I'm just shocked by this whole interaction. These are just two disgusting, toxic characters. Ugh. And then finally the girls, they get in a car and they start driving to work, and they realise that they're being followed by the same Muslim guy who was following Asher before. And then they go to work, and the Muslim guy drives off and pulls up behind a tobacco store, which apparently is some secret Muslim terrorist den. It's ridiculous. He says, "It won't be long now. These Christian whores will be sorry they defamed Allah. And then all the Muslim men get together to plot stuff, and it would almost be laughable if it wasn't so offensive, you know? And then Debi ends the chapter with some of the most offensive footnotes so far. So, I didn't want to copy these down, so let me just read them to you. She's like writing this stuff as like, this is facts, this is what I based the book on, this is totally true, the threat is real. Muslims use several ways to proselytize their religion: immigration, colonization, and outbreeding. After large enough communities are established, violent threats and militant police demands become effective. When Muslims move to new countries, they tend to become more militant, more conservative, and more dedicated to changing their new home to become an Islamic nation. Islam is a violent religion. Heaven is granted to the militantly faithful. It is Iran's ambition to export the Islamic revolution worldwide. At the Muslims' current explosive birth rate, it will become a reality within 10 years. Well, considering this was written in 2009 and it's now 2021, you might be a little off there, Debi. Through immigration and outbreeding, the Arabic Muslims have successfully colonized Europe. In one Arabic-speaking Muslim community in Bangkok, Thailand, there are over 20,000 strong. You can smell the difference as you drive by, as their cleanliness is not that of the Thai people. Locals fear the strange militant people. It's so disgusting. It's horrible. It's dehumanizing. It's nasty. It's full of stereotypes. It's false. It's just... I'm getting very angry. Sorry. You can understand why Debi Pearl needed to self-publish, because no one in their right minds would want to support this book. It is disgusting in every sense of the word, and that's only the first 100 pages. I know this has been long. I didn't expect this to be so long, but turns out I have a lot to say about it. We have another 220 pages to go as well. So, apparently the next chapter is about Yancy. I don't even know who Yancy is. Who's Yancy? But yeah, if you would like to see me continue to review this book, in depth or not, I don't mind. Let me know your thoughts down below. And if you'd like to see my other videos on the Pearl's books, I will also link them down below, and I'll link a whole playlist to all of my book reviews and all of my atheist stuff as well. If you're interested in the other families kind of related to the Pearls, like the Duggars, I'll try and link those videos as well if I remember. If I forget, drop me some comments and let me know as well. But for now, thank you so much for watching today. Thank you for letting me talk for this long. Thank you for sticking around this long. And hopefully I'll see you guys again very, very soon. Sorry, this was a tough one. Oh my god, this book. I don't only support burning books, but like after I'm done reading this, it's tempting. I'll be honest, it is very tempting.